Hey, welcome to the first episode of Media with Murray. Today we'll be having a discussion about Memphis sports radio, its past, present, and future. I've had the opportunity to speak with four amazing individuals about their experiences in Memphis sports radio. I'll go ahead and introduce them now. Jeff Calkins is an award winning sports columnist of the Daily Memphian and formerly of the Commercial Appeal. He is currently the host of the Jeff Calkins Show on 92.9 FM ESPN from 9 to 11. He was born in Buffalo, New York, and is one of the only non-native Memphian sports radio hosts currently on air. He attended Harvard and Harvard Law School. Jeff has a long-time radio presence in Memphis spanning over 20 years. Anthony Sane, a native Memphian, is currently the co-host of Mornings with Peter and Anthony on Sports 56 WHBQ. He has a background in journalism and also serves as a contributor to SportsIllustrated.com. He is one of only 5 people of color in the radio/podcast host/co-host positions in the city. He is known for his self-admitted, no-nonsense, cut-the-bullshit takes on sports. Devin Walker, at age 26, is one of the youngest members of the group. He is the co-host of The Chris Vernon Show on Grind City Media. He also serves as a social media coordinator for the Memphis Grizzlies. He is a native Memphian and attended the University of Memphis for his undergraduate degree. He originally got his start interning for The Chris Vernon Show while it was still on the radio on 92.9 FM. Last and certainly not least is John Roser. John Roser is the longtime producer of The Chris Vernon Show on Grind City Media and formerly on 92.9 FM ESPN. He also serves as the play-by-play commentator for the Memphis Grizzlies G League affiliate team, the Memphis Hustle. We'll start out our story covering the major organizations in play in Memphis sports radio. WHBQ 560 AM, currently branded as Sports 56 WHBQ, had their first broadcast on March 25, 1925. They were one of the earliest stations in Memphis. In 1954, WHBQ was acquired by RKO General, which turned it into a leading top 40 station. They used WHBQ as a farm team for RKO's larger stations. Young and aspiring DJs with hopes of moving up to larger markets would work there. By the early 80s, the top 40 station could no longer compete with the increasing popularity of other FM-branded contemporary music stations in town. They tried playing oldies in the early 80s, but then switched to a full-service talk radio format. In 1988, RKO sold WHBQ to Flynn Broadcasting, a local Memphis media company. Flynn tried oldies again, then country music, and even heavy metal late at night. In 1992, WHBQ switched to all sports. They were affiliated for a time with CBS Sports Radio and then NBC Sports Radio. In 2018, they switched to a Fox Sports Radio affiliation. They began simulcasting to FM 98.5 in October 2020. They are the area home for Ole Miss football and men's basketball, as well as the AAA minor league team, the Memphis Redbirds. They feature 4 daily scheduled talk shows: Mornings with Peter and Anthony, Middays with Greg and Eli, Happy Hour with Johnny Radio, and Sports Time on Sports 56 with Wolo and Stats. 92.9 FM ESPN, formerly known as WMFS-FM, was originally launched in 1995 by Bell's Broadcasting as Solid Rock 92.9 MFS. In 2001, they were acquired by Infinity Broadcasting and rebranded as 93X, an alternative music station. In 2006, they were purchased by Intercom Communications, where it switched to 92.9 ESPN. They are the flagship station for the NBA's Memphis Grizzlies. Recently, they began simulcasting to radio.com, as well as using that as a space to host their previously recorded shows. They also feature 4 daily scheduled talk shows: The Jeff Calkins Show, The Jason and John Show, Giannato and Jeffrey, and The Gary Parrish Show. By the ratings and the numbers, 92.9 is the premier sports radio station in Memphis. The newcomer to the group, Grind City Media, is the in-house media and news company of the Memphis Grizzlies. They feature sports talk shows such as The Chris Vernon Show, Rise and Grind, Just Grizzlies, The Odds Couple, and Grind City Wrestling. They have 2 shows, Rise and Grind and The Chris Vernon Show, which are presented in both live production live stream audio and video format. The catalyst for the creation of Grind City Media was when Chris Vernon and Intercom Media had contractual differences over Chris's show, which had existed on 92.9 FM ESPN for close to 10 years. Chris decided to switch his show to a podcast format, and that's when he was picked up by Grind City Media, and the Memphis Grizzlies. And as they say, the rest is history. Any story that's about Memphis sports radio must at some point mention one name: George Lapidus. George is considered by many to be the father of Memphis sports radio. He got his start on WHER in the early 1970s. George also held careers in journalism, higher education, as the athletic director of Rhodes College, and as the GM of the Memphis Chicks, a Kansas City Royals affiliated minor league team. At his retirement from radio on May 31st, 2016, just a month before he passed away from idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, he capped off a 45-year-long career in radio and the distinction of being the longest-running daily radio show in the country. Here's an excerpt from my conversation with Jeff Calkins about George.
George, and like a lot of radio people, they start out in newspapers, particularly once upon a time. And so George was a newspaper guy at the Press Scimitar until it folded. And along the way, he started doing sports talk radio, sort of just as a way of driving readership to the newspaper, because they were in a battle, the Press Scimitar and the Commercial Appeal. But when I got here, yeah, it was in the same way that you would pick up the newspaper to read what the columnist had to say, you would turn on Sports 56 to hear what George had to say. And George, I will say this, he had a newspaper's person's mentality. So he, like on the TV, I was stunned when I moved here, because at the Commercial Appeal, we would assign people to watch the news, the TV news station that broadcast every evening that George was on. Why? Because there was some chance he might break news. I came from Florida. The idea of assigning someone to watch local TV because they might break news, they didn't break news. The news was all broken by the newspapers. We had a newspaper war down there. So, but I credit George, like he brought that, he always wanted to break news. And that was true on TV, and that was true on radio. He had an ego, there's no question. It was easy to sort of parody. There are a lot of George Lapidus parodies, but that's in many ways a compliment. He was a little bit of the Howard Cosell of Memphis, in the sense that he was this sort of smaller Jewish guy who talked a lot, but everyone listened to him, and everyone, he was sort of, I guess by that I mean he was an unlikely sports talk show host.
Of all the radio personalities I interviewed, almost all of them attributed some of their success on the foundations that George Lapidus created for Memphis sports radio. Most sports radio hosts in Memphis get their job from traditional routes, such as becoming a journalist first. Here's Jeff on how he got started in radio with George, his transition to 92.9 FM, and some insight into sports radio culture in Memphis.
It's obvious, like in a place like Memphis, you move here, and you have opinions, and immediately you get put on the radio, like as a guest, right? I mean, like Danielle Lerner is hired at the Daily Memphian to cover the Memphis Tigers, and all of a sudden she pops up on the radio. Drew Hill was covered, and obviously he's on the radio. So that's an easy. You get to be a guest very quickly, but not a paid guest necessarily. Like most local radio stations don't pay anything to their guests. So then George asked me to be his sidekick, and at one point, and that was probably in the early 2000s. And I don't know how long I did that, a couple of years. And you're not paid I was paid $26,000 a year or something, like, to be his sidekick. And it was very clearly George's show. So in that way, it was easy. I just had to show up and sort of make fun of George every once in a while, and, be the dry counterpart. But then what happened is that then, I was offered a show. Gary Parrish and I were offered a show on 730, which was this outfit that decided that they wanted to, from Utah, they wanted to make a big splash, and say they offered me and Gary Parrish a lot of money to do a show, and they had lots of big promises. And so I kind of had a split with George at the time, because he was mad at me that I left, and in the end, we reconciled and we're good friends when he died. But so Gary and I went over there, And within 3 months, they realized they didn't have enough money or advertising to be able to pay us, but we had good contracts. So we just we just were then paid not to work for the year because they basically, and so then what happened was somewhere in there, 92.9, the current station, Dan Barron, who was the head of the station, was going to turn it from being a rock station. And he came to me and Gary. At the time, it was the Jeff and Gary show. And he wanted to move us over to his station. And we but he wanted a drive time show, and I couldn't do drive time because I was a divorced dad with 3 boys. And in the afternoon, you're schlepping your kids everywhere if you're a divorced dad. And so we came up with the idea of calling it the Gary Parrish Show with Jeff Calkins, and I would just phone in at 5 o'clock every day. That way my name would still be on it to help draw people in, but Gary would be the main. Gary wasn't as big then as he is now. He wasn't. Back then I was better known than Gary locally. Now Gary's a big deal. But anyway, so that's what we did. And I would just go on the phone, which is sort of a weird arrangement, at 5 o'clock every day. And Gary made a great success of it. Like, he's really good at sports talk radio. He's smart, he's funny, he has ideas, but he's sort of, a Mississippi kid. So he's easy to relate to. And then what happened is that station just built from there. They added Chris Vernon, they added Eric Hasseltine, and then they, somewhere in there, they added me. And then Vernon left, and the rest, like John and Jason John came on and whatever else. But at the time, Dan was a little skeptical that sports talk in Memphis would work as a 24-hour enterprise, because he's an Alabama fan. And he's like, in Birmingham, you can talk about Alabama 365 days a year. In Green Bay or Milwaukee, you can talk about he was like, in Memphis, we're so splintered. Will it be sustainable? And what's happened is that station has tremendous ratings, really. And with all due respect, like, dwarfs 560. 560 doesn't appear on the ratings, basically. And but most of us do the same thing, which is what Gary did once, and what I do, and whatever else, which is, yeah, we talk about sports, but we talk probably 60% sports and 40% other stuff. And like, I'm an intent listener in Buffalo because I'm still listening to Bills and Sabres, so I listen to WGR, and they're much more heavily sports. And if they ever stray from sports, I'm like, I want to be listening to the Bills. Why are you talking about ranking, donut flavors or something? But here, that mix has seemed to work. I mean, for the last, since COVID, about half my talk has been sort of COVID talk, really. So it's an interesting sports talk town, but I think it's been fun what we've sort of created over there.
Although most of the personalities on air today have come from the quote-unquote traditional system of becoming a locally known contributor to sports journalism first, before making the jump to radio, there is one name that my guests continue to bring up who forged his own path into radio.
Anthony Sane.
Anthony Sane,
the current host of Mornings with Peter and Anthony on Sports 56 WHBQ. I spoke with Anthony about his journey into sports radio and becoming a household name in the Memphis sports radio sphere. Here's a little from him.
As far as sports are concerned, when I was in school, I was a guy that would always have something to say about school sports. Like, I was kind of a commentator even back then. I always had an opinion of everything that was going on in sports, and I found that people would listen to me. I don't know really why they listened to me, but that was just something I was always in tune with. And as far as an adult's concerned, good friend of mine, Brooks Hanson, who's over Memphis 24/7, which used to be Memphis Roar back at the time. The University of Memphis had just hired Josh Pastner. He had got this great team together, that Joe Jackson class. They were getting ready to start, and the Bluff City Classic had came back to Memphis. And I was a big fan of Memphis Roar. I was on there every day for something. So I reached out to Brooks on Facebook and was like, hey, I plan on going to the game. If you need me for anything, let me know. Now, what that meant, I don't know. I don't know what that meant. He was like, well, are you on Twitter? I was like, yeah, I'm on Twitter. He said, well, here's the login to the Twitter account for Memphis Roar. Go to the event and kind of tweet what you see. So I'm like, hell, man, like, what do you mean? I mean, this was, you're talking about 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So live tweeting is something you see all the time now, but I didn't know what he meant. And he gave me the sticks to the video game, the controller, so to speak. So I was there and I was doing that. And I was like, man, I write a little bit. I said, I've always been a creative writer. My goal when I came out of college, I wanted to be a comic book writer. I wanted to write stories for comic books and draw comic books. And that's what I wanted to do. And I thought that was going to happen. But so I told Brooks, I said, I'm a pretty creative dude. So I've never done sports writing, but I'm sure I could do it, She was like, yeah, man, knock it out, whatever. So I would do things for Brooks every now and again. And that turned into me kind of writing for Memphis Roar every now and again or whatever. And then that turned into me wanting to do things with the Grizzlies. And that turned into me kind of starting my own blog at one time that never really jumped off. And then I started writing for 3 Shades of Blue, the OG in the blog sphere, so to speak. And then that turned into me starting my own blog. And then, that turned into me writing for the Tri-State Defender, I think. Something like that, man. I don't know. It's too much going on. So I started writing for the Tri-State Defender. And then that turned into me starting my own blog as well as writing for the Tri-State Defender. Blue World Order was the website I had. And then that turned into the Memphis Flyer, which is my first paid gig that I had as far as writing is concerned. I felt like I had made it at that point, So that turned into the Sports Illustrated Maven thing. And then going back a little bit, me and my good friend Cam Rose, we started we did paid radio where we were paying for airtime on AM 730, which is basically a trailer park in Nutbush where they do AM radio, paying for time, doing that, just getting my chops up. We were doing a show that came on at, was it 4 a.m? It was 5 a.m, 5 to 7, something like that. We were doing super early radio. Me and Cam were doing super early AM radio. Just getting our chops up, man, and then really the only reason why we were doing that is because we wanted a quality podcast. We were getting up doing this early show. Like, man, we'll get up before y'all get here, give us some airtime and let us get a quality podcast. Cause this is before you could literally just stick freaking iBuds, so like AirPods in your phone and do a podcast. It was way before that time. So we was like, man, we just want to do it. That seems like so long ago, technology wise. It was only like 5 or 6 years ago. So we were doing radio just to get a quality podcast. And we started finding out that people actually were tuning in early in the morning to listen to us. I had a friend of mine, he told me, he said, man, I used to get up at 5 and listen to y'all. And it just kind of hit me, man. Like I was tearful almost to think about it, you know what I mean? And so that led into us saying, hey, let's screw this whole radio thing. Let's figure out how to just make a good podcast. And we started the Outsiders podcast, very successful podcast in the city of Memphis, huge cult following. And we had the Owl Hours was our thing. We would put out a late night podcast at 10, 11 o'clock at night on a Sunday. That was when we always dropped the podcast. We always just come out of nowhere, and we would put an owl emoji up, and people knew it was coming. Just a great run that me and Cam had. And then that turned into guest hosting for the Jason and John show. Being a guest on the Jason and John show, which was a great opportunity for me. Put me in front of a lot of people, man. Just having fun with those guys. Jason Smith is a huge mentor of mine. Look at him like a big brother. Somebody I look at for spiritual advice. I look at him as a role model, as a father. He's a brother, a friend to me. Like seriously, like Jason Smith is my guy. And then that turned into guest hosting for 92.9 this past summer. And it was a tremendous opportunity. I guest hosted for every show on that station except for Giannato and Jeffrey. I guest hosted for Calkins, just guest hosted for Gary Parrish, Jason and John show. Just had a great time, man, learning from the guys over there. Brad Carson is just a genius in the radio business, honestly. I mean, he comes off as a guy that's kind of a golly gee, goofy guy on the radio, but behind the scenes, he's got a wealth of information, and he really, gave me a lot of wisdom, and just kind of tells it how it is. After that, an opportunity came up. Good friend of mine, CJ Hurt at Sports 56. He left Sports 56 mornings and took a job working for the Memphis Grizzlies with Grind City Media. An opportunity came up for me, and I prayed about it, and people at Sports 56 reached out to me, and they gave me an opportunity to have my own show, and I became only the fifth Black radio host in the city of Memphis.
Anthony brings up a good point here. With a population in Memphis that is over 60% African American, there's been a distinct lack of minority representation in Memphis sports radio. I spoke with Devin Walker of Grind City Media, who has the distinction of becoming the first African American on-air voice on 92.9 ESPN when he began working for the Chris Vernon Show, about the importance of being a Black voice in Memphis sports radio.
It means almost like everything, man, because I think when you look back, that's something when I got into it, when I didn't really know much about it. There's one thing I kind of noticed is as like 19, 20, 21-year-old, 22-year-old, is you notice in sports radio that a lot of people don't look like you. And it blows my mind in a city like Memphis where it's predominantly Black, where you didn't, dude, before me at 99, there hadn't been a Black person to work there. I was the first Black person to ever work at 92.9. I'm the Jackie Robinson of 92.9. So like before me, they didn't have a Black person to work there. So I think for me, it was huge because I know how important it is in the city to have a Black voice and to have people that look like them represent the city that they live in, Because like I said, my dad didn't really get into sports radio until I got into it. Like I started working in it. And for my dad to be able to go to like my church, which is in a predominantly Black community, or my barbershop where it's predominantly Black in North Memphis, and to tell them that my son works in sports radio, that kind of like that was super dope for me, because it's like I don't think people of my culture understand, like in the city, how not the less number of us that is in sports radio, I guess is a way to put it. But I think personally for me, it means so much, because it's like, man, I'm doing something that I love. I'm representing my culture. I'm representing my people, and I'm being able to do it on a platform where not many people that look like me get to do it.
As time has gone on, more and more African American voices have joined Memphis sports radio, but there is still progress to be made in producing a radio product that accurately reflects the cultural diversity in Memphis. Some would consider terrestrial radio to be a dying art. However, if the ratings numbers are any reflection, let alone the deeply ingrained culture of sports in the city, sports radio in Memphis will be around for a very, very long time. As a conclusion to each of the conversations with my guests, I asked them to reflect on what they saw the future of sports radio developing into, not just in Memphis, but nationally. For the most part, they split into two camps. One side trended to the point that there will always be a space for sports and sports talk radio in Memphis, as it has become so ingrained into the culture of the city. On the other hand, some said that sports, and really all terrestrial radio, must adapt to this new digital streaming age, or face elimination. Here's Grind City Media's John Roser on the business and future of radio.
To me, CBS Radio, they sold all of their stations for like nothing to Intercom, which tells me this is CBS telling you like, well, we got no interest in this. Like we this is not a big money maker going forward, going a long way. And I think, the only thing I can say, I know, because I know how these radio stations operate. There is a number, because they're all in clusters. It's not just a sports talk station that is owned by a company. They own several different stations in the market, whether it's Clear Channel, whether it's Intercom, whether it's Cumulus, whatever. Or Clear Channel is iHeart. They own several stations in the market. There is a sales number that they have to hit every year. That sales number is not going up, which means the revenues are not going up. If that sales number goes up, if that budget goes up every year, well, that means they're continuing to make money. That number has steadily declined over the last 20 years. It has gone down. I don't see it going back up. And so I think you see with the evolution of it, the Intercom has the radio.com thing. They're putting it on television, on smart TV now. So you can just search there. You can get on your phone, download the radio.com app, and you stream that way. Like, that's what it is becoming, rather, because there are these car companies, and this is a big part of it too. There are car companies that they are starting to make. They are making cars. They're looking to the future. They're not going to have AM, FM radios in them. They're not going to have them in them. Like, I know my car is a 2019 model. My car does not have a CD player in it. Like, like my car before that I had was a 2016. It was the last model they made that had a CD player in it. Going forward, 2017, they do not have CD players. That is going to happen with radios in cars too. Everything is going to be streaming. All your cars are going to, like, they're all going to be able to connect to Wi-Fi, and everything is going to be streaming. The world's just going to get more and more digital. And I'll tell you, this is one of the things I remember. Tony Kornheiser left his radio show in Washington, D.C. to start his own podcast. He left his contract early. He said, I'm not going to, they're like, you want another radio station? He's like, no, I just don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to do radio. And one of the things he said is because Tony Kornheiser was a columnist for the Washington Post, one of the most famous columnists, still does PTI with Mike Wilbon. And he said, I sat in those newspaper meeting rooms. I sat in those rooms in the 90s, sat in them. And everything they are saying, when I sit in these radio meeting rooms with bosses, they sound exactly like those newspaper bosses did back in the mid 90s and early 2000s. They sound the exact same. We'll see if they catch up with the transition, but as far as now, like, I don't think they're catching. I don't know if they will, because I'm not around terrestrial radio every day, so I don't know what the meetings and the talks are like. I don't know everything.
Although the future of sports talk radio in Memphis might be uncertain, the present time of Memphis Sports Radio is stronger than ever, with talented and diverse personalities covering the broadcast schedules of 92.9 FM ESPN, Sports 56, and Grind City Media. Thank you for joining me for the first episode of my podcast. Tune in next week as we discuss the influence of Twitter users in NBA front offices. Catch you next time on Media with Murry.